Well, people around the world are able to follow the Oscar Pistorius trial as it's beamed internationally by major news networks. As eNCA is broadcast in the UK, many British nationals and South Africans living in England are following proceedings closely. We'll put you in the picture as to what they have to say about how this trial is progressing in just a short while. But of course, we know yesterday the court heard for the first time how Reeva Steenkamp died, and a police ballistics report was read out in court. Just how big a role will forensics play in this case? Joining us in our Cape Town studios is forensic consultant Dr. David Klatzo. Dr. Klatzo, thank you very much for your time this morning. We'd initially had the impression this case was going to be won and lost on the accused's state of mind than anything else, but we're starting to see this case as fast becoming a forensic battleground, to quote one newspaper.
Yes, the forensics is going to be important because of the light that it will be able to shed on the mindset of Oscar Pistorius at that fatal moment of pulling the trigger. And it's really quite important to understand that at the beginning of the trial, it's quite difficult to see exactly what is going to crystallize into the most important part, if any. But there are certainly things that are starting to happen already. And the first thing that is really crucial is the nature of the sounds that were heard by the witnesses, the ear witnesses, to this unhappy moment. The sound of a gunshot, is it possible that that could be confused with the sound of a cricket bat on wood? I think that that is going to be a matter for forensic acoustics, and I think that the defense are going to lead their own evidence, but I think in great detail it's going to be unpacked, and the judge might even be taken on an inspection in loco to hear the difference between cricket bat on wood as opposed to a gunshot. Gunshots are very much louder. Generally speaking, a gunshot will be in the region of about 125 decibels, more or less, and the sound of wood on cricket bat or cricket bat on wood is going to be significantly lower, probably 5 or 6 times lower sound intensity. So if anything was going to be heard across the distance of over 100 meters, it is much more likely that they are gunshots, and they also have a much more characteristic sound compared to cricket bat on wood. Now, the second thing that is going to be important is to what extent are you going to be able to recreate that set of events? Is it possible that you can go now and knock a door down with a cricket bat and fire off a gun in the flat at 3 a.m.? Is that identical to the time that it happened a year ago? Well, in the interim, there's been building operations in between, and that is quite possible that will interfere with the transmission of sound. Also, the weather conditions, the degree of humidity, the wind, all sorts of things will come into it. So I see this being a central issue for debate. What is crucial is that if the witnesses are believed that they heard an argument or screaming of a woman before the gunshot went off, then the defense is going to have to think up some very sharp answers for that. It is a crucial issue as to whether Pistorius knew who was behind the door or not. And you remember, he's bound by what he said at the bail application. In his bail application, he makes the definitive statement that he heard nothing other than some sort of rustling noise that indicated to him that there was an intruder, and that he did not know who was behind the door.
Dr.
And that
Klatzo,
is the crucial element.
If I may come in there, please.
Yep.
The state is also going to dispute the sequence of gunshots. Now, this is interesting because they suggested yesterday that the initial police ballistics report is going to be disputed at some stage. How does one go about determining what sequence in which the gunshots were fired, given that they were fired so close to each other?
Well, the sequence seems to have been a single gunshot with a pause and then a more rapid sequence of 3. That seems to be the evidence that is coming out at the moment. And that will have to be tied in with the wounds to Reeva, because one thing you can say almost for certain is that the moment she was struck in the head by that fatal bullet, that would have precluded her from screaming from that moment onwards. The blood splatter within the toilet may well be able to indicate the sequence of the gunshots, in that there will be some blood splatter from the gunshots, probably more so from the head, and that you might be able to get at least a differentiation between the shot that struck her in the head and the other shots which struck her body and her hand. So that may become crucial, and that will also have to be integrated with the post-mortem report and the medical evidence that will be given by Gert Simon.
You know, what I find interesting is that the forensics that are being dealt with in this case are being, the prosecution and the defense both have access to exactly the same forensic evidence virtually. How much of an exact science is forensics if it's up to the interpretation of experts?
Well, you now touch upon one of the most sensitive subjects in forensic science as we speak, because a lot of what used to be considered exact science has been shown in recent years to be fairly subjective. And one will have to be very careful that one takes that subjectivity into account. You must remember, the forensic expert is not there at the moment of commission of the crime. He has to use second-hand information and facts and data which he gathers from the scene of the crime, and he has to draw inferences from that. And it is the authority with which those inferences may become invested which is going to be crucial in this case. So you're going to have two sets of experts, each drawing subtly different, or sometimes not so subtly different, inferences from the same set of facts. One thing I can tell you right now is that I think that there's going to be an enormous amount of legal argument about the sloppiness of the initial phases of that investigation. And one can only hope that the police have got their act together after Hilton Botha's initial ham-fisted approach to get the investigation back on an even keel, because that will become important, and it may, if the police have not done the job properly from thenceforth, it may become a crucial factor in determining the validity of whatever forensic evidence is led. But having said that, the initial blunders that Botha made are not going to be, I think, as relevant to the facts on which this case turns. We're not talking about much in the way of contact evidence or of trace evidence or DNA evidence. Those things are not going to be as important as they might have been in other circumstances. The key element here is going to be the ballistics, the blood splatter, the level of sound transmission, and the level of light in the room at that time of the year. Those, I think, are going to be the central areas that the case gets fought around.
Glatzo, one last question, and I'm going to press you for a brief answer here. Let's just return for a moment to the testimony of Michelle Berger, one of the ear witnesses, as you've described her. She made a very important point yesterday that there, subsequent to the killing of Reeva Steenkamp, there's been a great deal of development in the area quite close to the area where she and Oscar Pistorius resided at the time. I mean, how much does this new variable affect the sort of result that one could get from an in loco inspection?
It may well affect the transmission of sound, as I've already mentioned, and that is why it's almost impossible to recreate a forensic scene by means of this kind of reenactment.
Thank you very much for speaking to us this morning. A lot of insight into that story offered there by forensic consultant Dr. David Glatzo.
Know more about your world.
eNCA.com